Hey, it's just JP here, and in today's episode of casually over-explaining something you never saw, we will talk about Warpath. Maybe you noticed, but YouTube got flooded by a lot of trash and fake video game commercials. Video game commercials like Mafioso Town, Another Village Builder, and whatever this here is. In those times where the market is so oversaturated with trash commercials, the ones that are actually well made stick out even more. Today I want to talk about the commercial that I think deserves way more praise. And that is Warpath. I already talked a little bit about sound effects in my last behind the scenes video. Sound effects are an essential part of conveying mood and atmosphere in film. The over 5-minute long trailer starts with sound effects, rather than with a soundtrack. The first minute is completely dedicated to sound effects and not the music. In the first scene, we hear the loud scream of bomb sirens and gun noises in the background. This already creates the war atmosphere that the trailer wants to convey. Just those 5 seconds are enough to create this kind of atmosphere and immerse us into the action. The sound effects morph slowly into the music. First, it's just the sound effects of the telegraph Morse coding the commands to the troops. And then the background music slowly fades in. Finally, the beat drops. Cannons fire and the music takes over. Later on, that music is combined with something I only can describe as a propaganda-like song. It kind of glorifies it in a over-the-top way, if you know what I mean. It conveys that both sides have their own stories and believe in their own ability to win. A somehow important thing to note is that even though the sound effects are drawn out by the music, they are carefully placed so they fit the beat of the track. Then, at the beginning of the last half of the trailer, the music fades out to dramatize the loss of both sides. With the music stopping and his companions dying, the soldier realizes what war is really about, and that he is just one of many soldiers. This shift of tone gets quickly interrupted, because like war, it doesn't stop. So the rampage continues until the end. In conclusion, the music carries the tone and the theme of the trailer. And because this is very important, they used this to their advantage and conveyed a feeling of war throughout the whole short. From the beginning of the telegraph Morse coding until the end of the dying soldiers. This trailer has a lot of good transitions. Transitions can, in my opinion, make or break a video. If there are too many, it gets repetitive. If there are not enough, the video can get boring and monotone. Even though I found many good transitions, I just want to point the most important ones out. The first one is at the very beginning, when the officer gives commands over the telegraph, and the message resembles a similar form as the troops marching into battle. It not only looks good, but this transition has the purpose of establishing the officer. By the way, that's you, the player, of being in charge of every action on the battlefield. The next major transition is the zoom in.
Hello there.
The camera zooms into the bullet hole of a fallen soldier and zooms out in a completely different place. They used a masking technique and connected 2 clips seamlessly together. It creates a seamless flow that brings us from the battlefield directly to the home and the sad parents crying over the loss of their son. Every bullet counts and can cost somebody's life. But I think the most important transition is the blood splatter swipe. As with the other transitions, this one brings us in a matter of seconds from one place to another. It doesn't waste any time, but uses the motion of the knife, the cut, and lastly the blood to transition seamlessly into the next scene onto the battlefield. But what I find even more interesting is the symbolism behind that transition. While the officer is cutting himself with a razor, creating a rather small wound, the soldiers in the battle are dropping like flies. There are many great transitions, but I think those three really show the importance and the impact transitions have on story and the flow of film. Slow motion doesn't just make it epic, it helps us to focus on the important parts of the video. Take a look at the movie Transformers. I know, what were you thinking? Transformers are pretty stupid, aren't they? But let's be real, there are fun movies, and people still pay full-price tickets. But in all fairness, what it gets right is the slow motion. It makes the battle scenes much more enjoyable and interesting than, well, take a look at this. If you would take out all of the slow motion scenes from Transformers, you will end up with a movie that is much shorter. The Warpath trailer does something very similar, but a little bit more intelligently. Intelligently? Because we are talking about people fighting each other and not Transformers, the impact of those scenes is different. In the trailer, slow motion is used to focus our attention onto the details the filmmakers want us to. It catches and holds onto the moment the protagonists are currently experiencing. The here and now is therefore stretched out. Important, life-threatening moments are giving a bigger impact. Through techniques like speed ramping, the filmmakers accomplish to transition naturally from a chaotic moment directly into a slow motion sequence. The best sequence in which this technique is used is this here. The sequence is constantly changing between non and slow motion elements, while it's still being filmed in one take. All in all, this technique is used throughout the whole video to give the final piece a more cinematic and dramatic look, focusing our attention at what matters. From the first scene on, we are following two main protagonists. In the very first scene, we get introduced to a German general that takes command over his troops. He is very carefully introduced, through showing his medal, then his hat, and lastly the picture of a child, what I can only assume be his son or himself as a kid. The soldiers that we encounter in the first few scenes are looking happy, smile, and are not corrupted by the war that awaits them. A few scenes later, we get introduced to the Russian general, that as well as his counterpart has people relying on him. Once the beat drops and the action starts to roll in, the soldiers are trying to fight for their lives. We cut back to a satisfied German general, hearing about the success of his move. Learning about their losses, families, and victories is kept until the end, where lastly all of our main protagonists come together. In a very stylized scene, we see both soldiers that we followed throughout the video killing one another. Behind them, the generals of each faction who are responsible for the death of both men, and many more. I think for what it is, it does an amazing job in being different from all the other commercials you see today. The cinematography is great and carries with the help of the music the entire video from beginning to the end. Hopefully we will see more and more commercials that have some actual effort put in. In the end, it achieves the goal of making the game well known, but at the same time it conveys a message that discourages the playing of the game, and that is something very rare. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember that this video wasn't sponsored by Warpath. So if you enjoyed this type of content, then check out my other 2 analysis videos and subscribe so you won't miss any new videos. This is it, Just JP, stay creative and see you next time.